Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to today's special called meeting work session of the Board of Commissioners. Our meeting is officially called to order. In light of Chairman Boyce's absence, I will be heading today's meeting. Today, we will cover two tabs, one for public safety and the other for finance. And in the interest of time of our elected official, what I'd like to do is make a change to our agenda and have our elected official provide her presentation first. I don't see our Director Heaton here, but just want a quick nod if you're, are you okay with that move? Okay, very good. With that, we will turn to tab 2, and we will have presentation of the budget from Judge Kelly Wilkes' office with the probate court.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for your time. It's a little bit weird being on this side of things. So I'm used to being up there and judging what people do down here. So I have provided you all sort of a copy of our PowerPoint presentation so you can study ahead if you choose to. In the beginning, obviously we are always governed by our mission statement, which is to provide the highest quality of service to our public while professionally and efficiently carrying out those powers and duties of the probate court established by law. Our core functions, as I believe you all are aware, are set both by statute and constitution. I have yet to elect to start doing something. I have yet to be able to jettison anything I no longer enjoy doing. So what we do because we're told to do, and we are told to do everything that we do. Our revenue is set by statute. Whenever I talk about coming to you all and asking for money, the first thing everybody says is, why don't you charge more? Which I don't have the discretion to do. Everything is set by statute, most entirely under 15960, which if you look at it, I believe is currently somewhere between 6 and 8 pages of lists of fee schedules for pretty much everything we do throughout the day. One of the things I'm going to be asking you for is shelving. It's about as entertaining as it gets in commissioners' meetings when elected officials come over and ask for shelves. But our storage requirements are also set by statute and set out in the records retention schedule, and I've cited a couple of those to you, which are key to our request. We're requesting 3 things today. One, and our highest priority, is high-density shelving. Hopefully this doesn't come as a surprise to any of you. It's been in my pipeline request since the pipeline request was established. We're asking for 1 additional person, and I'll explain why, and 1 new computer for our current staffing positions. Our probate court is organized into 5 divisions. Judicial is me. Estates division is the division in which we are requesting the new full-time additional position. Then we also have the license division, with which most folks are familiar. Compliance division are those folks who have to file annual returns and status reports on incapacitated people and estates. Easiest to think of those as auditors. And then court administration, which is the folks that make the court run day to day. This is our organizational chart. I won't expect you to pass a quiz on it before my presentation is over. I would call your attention, though, to the very top purple position. That is a court support supervisor. That is currently an underfilled position. We do not have enough chiefs to support, we do not have enough Indians to support 1 more chief. We need that management position. We need that position as a supervisor in order to interface with information services, property management, supervise workloads, supervise interpersonal relationships within our 21 employees' relationships.
Judge, which position was this against?
The top purple one, the court, oh, you don't have a color. Purple is the court support supervisor up there at the top.
Okay, thank you.
We've underfilled that with a processing clerk because our workload, as I'll show you in a minute, is increasing to a level that we've had to sacrifice some of that supervision and cover it with other management personnel in order to have enough folks to meet with family members who are dealing with major loss or crisis, and making them wait is not ideal and really not acceptable. Just for your information, we currently have 21 total personnel in our office, including me as the elected. 3 part-time people are included in that total. And in our estates division, we have 5 full-time processing clerks to handle all of the estates, all of the guardianships, all of the related activity in our estates. So 5 is not a lot for almost 800,000 citizens. If you notice in our 3-year spending history, under FY15, there was a jump in personnel services. That was the first year that we had an associate judge. I was flying solo from 2009 to 2014, trying to get to all of the hearings, both on-site and off-site for some of our hospital hearings and involuntary activities. So we increased to allow for an associate judge, and that is reflected in that bump. Our operating costs in 2016 increased in a few different areas. Primarily, there was a push by the Supreme Court of Georgia, which you may have heard of, regarding access to justice. We've had a significant increase in professional services for interpreters, lingual interpreters, as well as sign language interpreters, both in court and for administrative tasks, such as filing for marriage licenses and needing to understand what they are applying for, and other access to our courts. And so those professional fees. We also have, as a result of a bill that was passed relating to weapons carry licenses, that requires state and superior court judges to ask a defendant if they have a firearms permit. If they do, ask them what county they received it from, and to notify that probate judge of any disqualifying conviction or situation. That has resulted in us getting notified of a significantly larger population of people who are not qualified to have weapons carry licenses under Georgia law. We then need to send the sheriff out to notify them that we are having to have a hearing to revoke their license, at which they are entitled to present evidence. It's that whole due process thing that we strive for. So we have had a significant increase in the number of citations out of county for those circumstances, and then folks who are not behaving appropriately that we need to cite to try to stop waste, mismanagement, or abuse of individuals. Yes?
Excuse me, another question for you, Judge. Does your court, does it handle all the permitting for the
Firearms,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Yep, firearms licenses are one of our larger things. I didn't spend a lot of time on it because that's within our license division. And we have finally gotten to a point where, in spite of ever increasing numbers, I think we are actually at full staff in our permitting office. And then if you notice also in fiscal year 15, we had an increase of nearly $6,500. Our court reporter retired. We decided to make a one-time expense of a sound recording system in our court, and to reallocate those personnel funds to create some more growth opportunity within our office and some more supervisory positions, and that got shifted around, and that's where that came from. Our next slide shows you essentially what our workload has been since I took office. It seemed like a logical point for me to take as the starting point, since that's what I'm familiar with. Applicable to our discussion today, besides the fact that we're up nearly 50% in all of our divisions, estates and guardianship cases require significantly more processing time than do marriage licenses and weapons carry licenses. The numbers are up higher in those other divisions, but we've received some additional personnel, and as I said, I think those are fully staffed. To give you a little bit of insight, at 5 estate clerks, estate processing clerks, which is what we had when I started in office. We were processing approximately 1,130 cases per clerk per year, which breaks down to about 94 cases a month that each of them is processing. If we meet our projected for 2017 and remain at 5 processing clerks, we'll be processing nearly 1,600 cases per clerk per year. So that's about 132 cases of families in extreme loss, extreme triage, extreme crisis, between mental health cases, orders to apprehend, estate cases, and guardianship cases. So we're not talking about cases that require putting it in a filed-in stamp and sending it to another office. This is ongoing services, ongoing interactions with the family, setting it for hearings, appointing case attorneys for cases, and all of those types of things. If we get the additional person that we're asking for at 6 processing clerks, we are looking at a workload of 1,325 cases per clerk per year, or 110. So we'll still be above the 2009 and 2013 staffing levels, but we'll be at a more sustainable pace for the processing clerks to provide that level of service that I know you all expect for your constituents. Our caseload percentage increases are 41 for estates, 44 for weapons carry license, and 46. And our office has really rallied to try and maximize efficiencies and make sure that things are working for our customers. With work comes processing, comes paper. In 2009, we received assistance from property management, increasing our linear self-storage. They came in and built out some of our walls and made some wooden shelves for us to use. At that time, we estimated that that project would increase our on-site storage by 8 to 10 years. In January, that will be 9 years. We guessed really well because we're out of storage. We have half of a shelf left to make it through the rest of the year for everyone who needs to file with the court between now and the end of 2017 calendar. We are looking to do high-density shelving. We are going to need assistance from property management to maximize our available footprint. We have 4 room areas that if we knock out all of the non-weight-bearing walls, we can have a large area that we can fill to the absolute maximum in that same footprint. They estimate that it will be no more than $40,000 to knock out the walls, fix the ceilings, do the flooring, do all of that. So we've put in here for 40, knowing that that is their no more than amount. We also need the actual shelving, and I will tell you that the quote for that many movable high-density shelves for that much space is approximately $94,000. They'll have to come in and put in the tracks and do all of that. It also provides for increased fire protection for our historical records. Again, I don't choose to keep these because I have hoarder inclinations. I keep these because it is set by statute and laid out in the records retention schedule. And we are compliant with the records retention schedule for electronic backups so that we have the information. I will tell you that we are far, far outside of compliance as a county for protecting these historical records. They are theoretically supposed to be in a fireproof safe, which would be an enormous task. These shelves provide increased fire protection, not absolute fire protection by any means. And as I say, we are compliant with the law, but we are not compliant to be able to come in after a fire or a bomb or something and be able to recover the actual 1865 wills, the 1860 records, the historical marriage records, and all of the things that we are charged with keeping as one of the repositories for the County of Historical Records. Our request for shelving goes back to 2014. We made the grand jury aware of it at that point in time so that the county commissioners and the county in general would be aware of it. We specifically said we're not asking for it because it's not a need. When it is a need, we'll ask for it, and we need you all to understand that it will be a need. And I said at the time, if I need to ask for it so that I can get told no, so that I can ask for it when I need it and you'll give it to me. And I was assured, don't ask for things that you don't need until you need them. And I am here and I need them. And so I'm telling you that I need them because I need them. So that was the recommendation of the grand jury back in mid-2014. As a side note and an additional point, I spoke with Larry Walker in records, and I said to him, admittedly, I would prefer to have these records on site because they are checked. Not every record by any means is checked every day, but historical records are checked regularly. And we have a number of people who are doing real estate record searches and those types of things who pull these records on a regular basis. It would be much, much, much less efficient and desirable, both for our office, for Larry's office, and for the end user customers who come into our office to do these research projects, to have to order these documents, wait 2 or 3 days for them to get to us, come back to our office, pay again to park, do all of those things, look at the records, and then us to send them back off site. So having them on site is much more desirable. I admittedly said my preferred answer would be no. Larry replied to me, respectfully, absolutely not. Can we accept everything that you would need to download to us? Because we simply do not have the storage space. So it's not an efficient, it's not just that I would prefer for them to be on site. They simply don't have the room to accept over 700 linear feet of records that we would need to download to them. Probate case, court caseload. I gave you the percentage increases and the increased numbers that we would have if we do not get an additional person. Additionally, we really do need to have that supervisor position. The amount of time that my chief clerk, my court administrator, and my compliance manager, we estimate that we're spending between 15 and 25% of our time interfacing with other offices, to the exclusion of being in court, to the exclusion of assisting customers who need help, to the exclusion of doing the day-to-day functions and core functions that we're mandated to do. Meeting with IS, meeting with property management, meeting with shelving contractors, meeting with our own co-employees to work out, when people take lunches and those types of things, because somebody's got to do that, and we don't have that position filled. That's why it was created, and it's not being used for that, so it's detracting from our other managerial functions and personnel. And last is our proposed budget request, which incorporates what we have put in. That first line on personnel in our requested increase is the 59,411.59 for a new processing clerk with fringe. The capital expenses, 134,207.58 is the shelves plus the property management, no more than budgeted amount. And then our increase in operating, I'll be happy to go through line by line for you, but the big ticket items are the increase in operating includes 2 computers, one for the position that we shifted over to underfill the current position, as well as the requested new position, and a phone for the requested new position is in that number. An additional increase in professional fees because we didn't allocate enough last year. We're going to go over on that line, and we need to make sure that we try and come up with an accurate budget for y'all. We're going to be over on one of our line items, which is professional fees. We're going to cover that within our own budget, but we cannot charge litigants the cost of hiring interpreters. That's in violation of the access to justice provisions. So that is a cost that we're going to have to eat when somebody pleads guilty to a felony and they have a weapons carry license. We need to not have them have that weapons carry license that they can use to purchase a gun without a background check. We need to get it out of their hands as soon as possible. Those are $50 a pop service fees out of county. Oftentimes, unfortunately, they have moved, and that then becomes $100, $150 worth of services per person to try and get people to come in and attend those hearings. Those are unrecoverable costs. Court-appointed attorneys are generally recovered costs. Those are going up with the number of filings. And then we have a significant increase in our budget for recoverable costs related to photo supplies and things like that that relate to our weapons carry license printing. Ta-da, that's it.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. Good presentation. If I might, on one of the previous slides, you mentioned your revenue for 16 was about 1.5, and you're somewhat 80 under your expenses. Do you know what your projected revenues are for 2018?
I only know what my projected revenues are because I asked finance, and they said that they are pretty much keeping them stagnant. Only because if you can tell me how many guardianships the people of Cobb County are going to need this year and how many of them are going to die, I'll be glad to fill that in with more accuracy, but I have yet to get that power.
But the bottom line is somewhere around 90% of your budget is revenue that you
Yes.
bring into the county. So I don't know of many departments that have that record. So.
We're real proud of that.
Okay.
And also, I know that there was some concern in some of the previous presentations about who is contributing toward larger projects. I will say that it is part of our daily function to do our deposit. Our deposit goes virtually daily into the county fund. We do not, we deposit directly into a subfund of the general fund that's accessible. We don't have a separate bank account. We don't hold those funds from you all. So, so we are, what we get, we share with you all immediately, and make it available to the county for your use.
Great. Well, the other question I had is, with all the records that you retain, I know some of the other departments, state clerks and court clerks and all that, are doing some scanning of these documents. Are these not eligible to be scanned? They have to be read on parchment?
And the reason is, looking at your ticket from 5 years ago, the minutia and the sort of the underlying not so obvious things are not so important. When people are looking for genealogical searches and looking at wills and looking at marriage licenses and things like that, it's all very important. What they put, what they didn't put, how they spelled it, you know, all of those types of things. We have genealogical searches who come in and look at marriage records, look at death records, look at, you know, because you've got statements within those filings that have, you know, you're saying who the decedent's heirs are. You're saying the decedent wrote the will, sometimes in their own hand. Some of those things are very historically important. And they are a higher level requirement of retention under the state statute and under the records retention schedule.
Well, I understand that. It's well and good, but can it be scanned?
No, legally, no, it cannot.
Legally, it can.
Legally, it cannot. By statute, it has to. We have to retain the original newspaper. We have to retain Friday newspapers for the legal ads. We have to retain original wills and the files related thereto. We have to retain. We've got 33 5-drawer filing cabinets full of almost nothing but marriage licenses going back to the 1800s. Everybody who's ever filled out a marriage license, you can come on over. They're fascinating to look at sometimes, but yeah, we are required to keep those indefinitely. So I'll be happy to give you the names of some legislators if you want to go lobby to change that. But right now,
I know them. I just didn't realize we were still looking at parchment paper when we could be scanning it.
No, we are definitely looking, and that is one of our greatest concerns. Is we have records to 1865. That we are concerned with just being in a basement, you know, and we're trying to preserve those to the best of our ability, but we do not allocate for document preservation as a cost of the probate court. If you
Thank
want to, that'd be great, but I'm not going to ask you for it.
Thank you so much. It's a great
Absolutely,
presentation.
thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Judge Wilk, for
Thank
your
you
time
so much. You
today.
guys have a great day.
Thank you. You do the same. All right. With that, we're going to go back to tab 2, item number 1, with presentations from public safety, beginning with Cassie Maslin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Mr. Hosack, Mr. Rowling. Thank you for the opportunity today to talk about our local emergency operations plan. I'm fortunate to have submitted this document 3 times now. I do feel like it's one of our best. I have 2 of my staff here today, Sean Laughlin, who is our planner, and Ryan Solis. They've had a big part of this plan, doing the workshops and everything that goes into it. So look forward to explaining it to you, and we'll entertain any questions that you have. So our local emergency operations plan, or our LEOP as we call it, is a required plan by the state of Georgia. It is a collaborative effort between our cities, our public agencies, and our private sector. So we do work with everyone within the Cobb community to make this document possible. This plan is due every 4 years. The last time the plan was submitted and passed by the board was on August 13th, 2013. The purpose of the LEOP is to describe the structure and processes of EMA's approach to incident management, integrating the efforts of municipal governments, as I said earlier, and the private sector and non-governmental organizations. So how do we work? What is our process during times of disaster, or even on a minor emergency or daily event that we could be facing? So the LEOP during a disaster works off basic activation levels. A level 1 is a full-scale activation. We have not had a full-scale activation in Cobb County since 2009 during the September floods. So we do pretty much normally have a monitoring level, which is a level 3. We are at that state quite frequently with any significant weather event. Also a partial activation, we have had several of those with the winter weather events that we've had and potential tornadic events and things of that nature. So we do that most frequently. Most frequently, you're going to have a level 3 or level 2 activation. So what is a declaration of emergency? Following a declaration of emergency and during the continuance of such state of emergency, the chairman is authorized to implement local emergency measures to protect life and property, or to bring the emergency situation under control. So how do we gain back our state of normalcy? That's what this document entails, and that's what it's broken into so that we can get there in the quickest manner possible. So the format of the LEOP. In the beginning of the LEOP, you have our general county information, our population, the part of that is considered vulnerable, and as well as our historical data. So a lot of that historical data is any events that we've been through here in the county, such as the 2009 floods. The responses within the EOC are broken down to what we call emergency support functions. There are 15 of those. They are also laid out in the LEOP. Within each ESF, there's a primary and support agency to assist us with that goal. Each agency represented has a primary and a support personnel. So that primary is your number 1. So let's say, something happens in the middle of the night, they might not be able to respond. You have 2 to fall back on, so that you have someone in the Emergency Operations Center 24 hours a day on what we recommend is a 12-hour shift. The contact information for each agency is included in the back of the document. It is an unpublished annex, so when you locate that document online, you would not have access to that information since it contains all private numbers and such. There are the emergency support functions, just so you can see those. So as you see with each 15 of those, you have an annex which is broken down into the document. This year we conducted 4 workshops. This was a great idea, and one that they did very well with. They had like agencies come into the center, ones that that you would have with similar functions. So transportation, public works came together, just like public safety, fire, PD. They all came together at one time so that they can, 1, get used to being in the room together, see where they're supposed to sit, also have an opportunity to log on to WebEOC. So where are we now? Once we review, you guys ever had a chance to review the plan, and upon your approval, this plan will be submitted to GEMA for their final approval.
We will continue to update this document annually. It's a living document. Something changes, it will immediately be fixed. We do look at the contact information because let's face it, that's one of the most important things. We can't get in touch with people or people retire. We need to be able to know who's in charge for that specific function. So that is updated regularly. Once we have this document approval from GEMA, we will be disseminating the plan to all agencies and partners that are listed within, and we will also seek adoption from each municipality. Do y'all have any questions? Okay.
I can call you director now.
Yeah.
Your director. We have a pretty thick document on this process. Can you just let us know high level, what are the changes between the document 4 years ago and this one outside of the context?
Basically, the functions are the same.
Okay.
So when I was telling you about the workshops, I thought that was a good idea because each agency had the opportunity to look at their responsibilities. So we know that they vetted these things.
Okay.
Okay. The things that you might see differently, it is shortened because we have narrowed down the primary and support functions within each annex. So
Okay.
instead of having a whole list of people, we've looked at it more closely. Who actually is going to do these things?
Okay.
We've made contact with them. I feel it's a much more refined and specific plan than it was before.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Cassie, and I don't know, like Commissioner Cubitt said, we got a whole bunch of a pretty thick document. But having been here during the floods, I
Yes.
know one of the things that, I won't say that it fell apart, but, the initial emergency action things, went great and all that. But then when we got down to the actually getting people back in their homes
Right.
in Vinings and even more so down in South Cobb, that's kind of where things, I think, fell apart a little bit. And I know Rob was here then too. Because what happens is this kind of deals with almost like the public safety side of it. But what happens is when you have to get the community development, when you have to get inspectors out there,
Right.
okay, or the fact that Georgia Power comes in and shuts off the power. And then they're not going to come in there until the street is deemed safe, or the fact that our inspectors, we, at the time, and I don't know if it's still the same way, Rob, but we required people to come up here to the county to file their permit so that we would get an inspector down to that area. Okay, now, we immediately took care of that and parked the inspectors down there, but if this plan doesn't include how we get people back up and operating.
It is. You're talking more about also going into the COOP and into the hazard mitigation plan. But EMA will be responsible for the recovery process.
Okay, because I just know when we actually did it,
Right.
that it
before,
kind
and I
of, we
was
did
part of
great
that
with
too.
the major part, and then it took a lot of additional outside effort. Remember, Rob?
It does.
To kind of figure out how it was not designed, it was kind of designed to get the county stuff working and reach out and all that, but I just think that it was kind of lacking in what the folks had to deal with. So I don't know if that's in here, but if it isn't, and even if we have to make a supplemental, because once, especially in a flood situation, there's a whole lot of departments that normally would not interact with you
Right.
that now have to kind of come to task and figure out how they're going to be doing things out of the ordinary. I mean, the paperwork.
Right.
We had to bring it all down to the folks because they can't leave their property. And I had one guy who nothing was wrong with his house. His air conditioning was up on the shelf, and he could not get Georgia Power out there because the process wasn't being followed.
Right. I believe since the floods too, we've made a stronger connection with our community partners, and we do train more, meet more. We've once you've lived through something once, you don't want to repeat your mistakes. And so part of that process is how can we be better? And I do feel that public safety and emergency management as a whole is a lot more prepared to a point that I don't want to suffer through that process.
Are those new things or whatever, are they in this plan?
All those agencies that are identified to help with
Okay,
recovery
all
are
right.
in this plan. Yes.
And I'm sorry, Commissioner, just to piggyback off of Commissioner Ott's point, is there a separate documented process about how to engage those community partners?
No, not a separate document as part of the plan.
So that's part of this plan here.
It would be part of that recovery process, which would be
Okay.
ESF 14.
Okay.
long-term recovery and mitigation.
And another thing that I just thought of this too, and for whatever reason, the name of the dam escapes me, but the one that they had to open all the floodgates, remember? Do you remember which one I'm talking about? Morgan Falls, that's it.
Yes, yes.
Back then, we did not have communication set up with the Corps or the folks that operated Morgan Falls. So, for example, we now know that it takes 9 hours for the water to get from Beaufort Dam to Morgan Falls, and then 4 hours from Morgan Falls to Vinings. But back then, we had no idea that they were getting ready to open up the gates because they had to, because the dam was going to be topped. Do we now have regular basis so that
Yes, we do
when they
communicate.
open the dam, if they open the spillway at Beaufort or they're going to get ready to open the spillways at Morgan Falls, that we're going to know because, for example, they gives us 4 hours notice for Vinings and 2 hours for Collins Drive.
Yes, sir, we do communicate with them.
Okay.
Director, I noticed you mentioned we're partnering with all the 6 cities, I'm assuming. What about other agencies such as Cobb Schools, Police, KSU, Life College, all the other
Yes, sir, they're all
public
at the table.
safeties? Are they included in this
Yes,
as
sir,
well?
they're all included.
So we come together, and then Commissioner Ott's point, then we have other agencies like Georgia Power and the other things that are also included. in
Yes,
this
sir,
as well.
ESF 12 is also at the table for the LEOP to give review.
What about the Corps of Engineers, since we have some, I know the dams are controlled possibly by them, or that might be at Georgia Power line, but
I'm not sure, we meet with Corps of Engineers? He's saying we went to a table, we did go to a tabletop with Morgan, about Morgan Falls.
well, I know I was at Ackworth at the time. We didn't have to worry about letting the dam out for Lake Ackworth because it went over it. It was, it was.
Well, and that's actually why
Lake
that's-
Ackworth and Lake Allatoona were the same.
Yeah, well, and that's actually why they had to open up every single spillway at Morgan Falls because if it had topped it, it would have destroyed the dam.
So,
We were just lucky that Lake Lanier had the storage capacity that they never had to release
the
water.
bottom
from.
line is you got all this handled.
I hope so, sir.
All right.
That's my plan.
Thank you.
Commissioner
questions?
Burrow?
This has been through our legal department.
The
This
LEOP,
plan?
no, it was not reviewed by legal.
Does it need to be?
It hasn't been in the past.
It hasn't, okay.
No.
Because it is on consent for tomorrow morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Don't review it, take another year.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments?
No?
Thank you, Director. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, next up, we have a presentation of findings and recommendations from the Police Operations and Management Study conducted by the International Association of Chiefs of Police.
Well, good afternoon, Mrs. Vice Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. County Manager. This is in direct response to the IECP report that was finalized and was presented to the Cobb County Board of Commissioners. What you're going to see today is the interaction certainly that we have had with the IECP, but more so than that, you're going to see some of the actions that we have taken as a department to address some of the priorities, specifically the priority 1 and priority 2. You'll see the agenda. In the summer of 2016, the Cobb County Police Department contracted the International Association of Chiefs of Police to conduct a study of CCPD. Now, the requested study obtained information from a variety of mechanisms and sources. Internally, interviews with various personnel, workforce surveys. They also did operational observations, such as ride-alongs, where we actually had members of the ICP go out with officers into the field. And while they were riding with the officers in the field, they were actually taking field notes and actually had a formalized mechanism of grading what was happening in the field as our officers interacted with the public. And also data and informational analysis. And certainly they used that data to give some of their findings as far as staffing. Externally, they did interviews with citizens, online feedback. I think there was respondents, there was 418 respondents from the citizens of Cobb County. and operational observations concerning citizen interaction. And again, that goes back to being in the field, and also the IACP representatives certainly got to speak one-on-one with citizens during various forums. The final IACP report was produced in May of 2017, and it was presented shortly after that, I think in June, to this board, and focused on the following 19 areas. You'll see the 19 areas there, beginning with policing characteristics and trends and ending with resources and resource management. The study was conducted in 6 phases. Of course, phase 1 was the project organization. The data collection was phase 2, preparation of findings and recommendations, and all the way through our current phase, which is phase 6, implementation assistance. Study produced 34 recommendations. Those 34 recommendations were divided into 3 various priorities, priority 1, 2, and 3, with priority 1 having 14 recommendations and were to be considered priority 1 because the IACP suggested that they be implemented as soon as possible. Priority 2 was the next set of priorities and recommendations in importance, and of course, priority 3. There was 14 priority 1, 14 16 priority 2, and 4 priority 3 recommendations, for a total of 34. The recommendations overview, recommendations identified the following 4 themes: recruiting, hiring, and properly training new officers, and that also includes leadership; building relationships and trust with the community and a co-production model of policing with modern policing methods and practices; implementing adjustments to staffing and deployments; adjusting organizational leadership actions to support the transition to a co-production or a community-type policing model and procedural justice-focused management style. And we will certainly hit on these themes as we get further into the presentation. Some of the positives in the report, and this came directly from the report, IACP report, page 1 and also page 149. A generally efficient and well-organized agency with a strong commitment to community policing and collaborative problem-solving efforts. Staff at all levels present a high level of commitment and pride in their work. Command staff at the CCPD want what is best for the agency and the community, and the survey that was conducted with 418 respondents cited a 91.5% positive perception of CCPD. But of course, some of the negatives in the report were perceptions of discriminatory and biased policing, a militaristic look, need for more transparency and public oversight, relationship building and community interaction, increased women and minorities within the police department. In the survey, certainly, again, with the same 418 respondents cited an 8.5% negative perception of CCPD. Now, when you look across the country, there's been a couple of polls back in 2016. And one of the polls by Gallup, Respect for Police, in 2014, the respect among police officers among whites was about 64%, and among non-whites was 53%. But because of the emphasis that I think police departments have put on community policing and other endeavors, that partnership and engage with the community, another poll in 2016 found that the confidence in police, or the respect for police, was growing. It had actually increased 14%, up to 80% for whites and also up to 67% for non-whites. And that was the Gallup poll in 2016. Pew also conducted a poll in 2016, and the poll covered the confidence that citizens have in police. And they found that overall there's a 76% confidence in police, in local police, with whites being 81%, non-whites being 55%. Same poll, equal treatment. And this is where a large disparity begins to be visible. With the white population, it was 75% stating that they felt that treatment was equal, and non-white about 35%. And also another area that concerns me as a police leader is the accountability. You have one segment of the population in the same poll, 70%, believing that there's adequate accountability for police actions, and certainly with non-whites, it's only 31%. You'll see a list of the 14 Priority 1 recommendations, beginning with engage in more interactive and inclusive leadership style and ending with review disqualification policies and practices. And as we look at these 14 Priority 1 recommendations, we'll see that we believe that we can categorize these in 4 categories of leadership, training, operations, and administration. When we say put them in categories, we believe that certainly leadership and training will impact the ones that the Priority 1 recommendations that you see on the left. And operations and administration, that means that there's going to be certain policies and protocols that we're going to have to examine and analyze, and there may be funding, additional staffing that we'll need to do what you see in the right-hand column. I'd like to concentrate on a couple.
Excuse me, Chief,
Action.
you said there were 4 categories, you only showed 2, is that right, or did I miss?
Well, I am.
Oh, I see. Leadership,
It's leadership,
training. Oh,
and then
the
training,
slash,
and
never
then
mind.
operations and administration. Yes, sir. Our actions in the first 45 days. Initial plan of action, created committees to address the Priority 1 and Priority 2 recommendations with development of a 30-day, 90-day, 6-month, and 12-month plus plan of implementation. Let's look at a few of the Priority 1 recommendations. Priority 1, Recommendation 1 was engage in a more interactive and inclusive leadership style. Priority 1, Recommendation 2, increase mid and upper level management training. And you'll see some of our actions under that. Sought partnership with the IACP, the FBI LEADA program, Southern Police Institute, Northwestern University, et cetera, to leverage training opportunities and other resources that will assist the department in being more effective and professionalized via various training for personnel and leadership, data collection and evaluation, accountability, and community engagement partnership. For instance, the IACP has a 3-week leadership in police organizations course. It is a 3-week course that is done in 1-week segments. And as you are well aware, when the IACP came to present their findings, they advised the board and the county manager that there was grants available or funds available through SunTrust. I have asked the IACP to actually come in and use those grants to train all captains and majors. There's 7 majors, 10 captains, and 2 deputy chiefs and myself, for a total bill of about $27,000. Also, I've asked them to include the book cost in that is $77 per officer. I have been engaging with Mr. Baker at the IACP. They have yet to give me a final answer, but he and I are going to engage on this subject again August 18th and discuss this more. Also, the FBI LEADA, they have 3 supervisory and executive level courses that they have agreed to come in and teach. One is for supervision, one's for executives, and one's for command. They suggest that all supervisors and command staff from captain and above go through all 3, and for lieutenants to go through at least a supervisory portion. SPI, we've spoken with them about a week-long course that we can bring in, and we have looked at several other mechanisms, and as I get further into the presentation, I'll give you an idea, or I'll expand upon an idea that we have. We created a committee to create a leadership development program within CCPD, not just bringing in outside vendors, but what are we doing inside the police department to help our leadership grow professionally. And that is from the rank of sergeant all the way through deputy chief, and of course the chief himself or herself. And what we want to do is develop a program and formalize a program where individuals that are being promoted to sergeant, we don't just give them a piece of paper and a badge and say, you're a sergeant, go out and be a sergeant. We want to give them all the necessary tools that they need in order to go out and accomplish the expectations that we have of them. We want to set them up for success. So many times, and I think that certainly some of the law enforcement officers, the 2 deputy chiefs that I have in here, will appreciate this. And You get a piece of paper where you're promoted, you go to sleep at 10 o'clock, you wake up 8 o'clock the next morning, and the only thing that's changed is the date. You're still the same person. You don't know anymore, but at 12:01, you were promoted to sergeant, lieutenant, captain, whatever the course may be. And we want to make sure that we take our leaders and we give them everything needed to be great leaders and managers within the department. And we also want to develop a mentorship program, a 12-month mentorship program where that sergeant or that lieutenant, the captain, whatever the rank may be, will be partnered with a senior person of comparable rank, and there will be a 12-month process or a 12-step process where that senior sergeant will have to engage at least once per month with the sergeant that was just promoted or the lieutenant that was just promoted, and not only engage with them, but there'll be a formalized mentorship program on what we expect them to get accomplished during the mentorship program each month. So it's kind of like AA, it's a 12-step process. And hopefully that will help them grow also. Develop a weekly command meeting and a crime analysis policing strategy meeting. Every Monday, the department now has a majors meeting. Majors meeting entails my staff, all the majors within the department, the 2 deputy chiefs and myself, and we look at operations personnel and administration, and we try to synchronize and coordinate what we're doing. And then on Wednesdays, we are enacting a CAPS, a crime analysis policing strategy meeting every Wednesday to look at what is happening in our community from a crime standpoint, not only overall, but also in each precinct, and develop a course of action or a plan of action in order to make sure our citizens are being kept safe in the community and their quality of life is being maintained and improved. Develop committees to review various organizational procedures and committees. We also are using data more effectively to drive organizational decisions. And I think that's very important. Some of the things that we've uncovered from 2013 to 2016, calls for service have increased about 4% at the police department. And, you know, I know we talk, and there's a section in here about traffic stops and about our traffic enforcement. But when we start looking at the data, we see that in 2016 alone, we had 94 call-outs of STEP. We had 35 vehicle fatalities, one of the highest, and we had 17 pedestrian fatalities of the last several years was the highest. And we also see that our accidents have increased from 2013 to 2016 from 19,200 to 25,381 accidents. But in that same time period, our citations and traffic enforcement has decreased around 12 to 13%. There could be a lot of reasons for that. One could be staffing, surely. The officers don't have time to do self-initiated field activity going from call to call. And of course, you're very familiar with the staffing levels that the IACP recommended. And I'm sure that as a community, we will take those staffing levels seriously as we move forward. But when we look at statistics, we have to put things into perspective. For instance, over the next several years, 2021, by 2021, we are estimating that we're going to have approximately 86 sworn officers retire by 2021. So that is another facet of the leadership and staffing that we have to look at. And when we talk about staffing between 2013 and 2016, we hired 336 officers, but we actually lost 234 for a net gain of 102. And what's really disturbing about our recruitment and retention, and we can recruit all day long, but if we can't retain the officers, what good is it? It's just a revolving door. But what's disturbing is the statistic. In 2014, on a monthly basis, we were receiving approximately 333 applications for prospective applicants to be police officers. Today, that's down to about 170 on the average we get per month. And so we, as a department, are working with OPS to look at possibilities and look at some ideas on how we can increase the recruiting potential. But while we're doing that, we certainly have to look at things that we can do within the department and also as a county to retain these officers. Very familiar with the leadership and the disparity in ethnicity and gender. 2013 to 2016, for a total, we hired 25 black females, a total of 19 white females, and a total of 7 Asian females. That same time period, we hired 54 black males, 199 white males, 8 Asian males, and 24 Hispanic males. When you look at chief, or sergeant to chief, there's 140 supervisory positions. 14 African Americans are within that pool, about 10%, and 4 Asians. And if we add the African Americans and Asian supervisors, we have about 12.8% of minorities filling our supervisory ranks from sergeant to chief. If we look at it just from a gender standpoint, last statistic that I'll throw out, we have 54 supervisors from lieutenant to chief, and of the 54 supervisors, we only have about 3.7% females filling those positions. But one thing leads to another. We've got to recruit more minorities. We've got to recruit more females. But no matter what ethnicity or gender, we've got to ensure that we promote people from a performance-based perspective. And we've also got to ensure that if we are going to expect to promote people from a performance-based perspective, that we have to give those young men and women, and sometimes not so young men and women, everything that they need in order to succeed and make Cobb County their career in law enforcement. Develop a better system of vertical and horizontal communication. We're certainly trying to do that with newsletters and other mechanisms that we are enacting and we have already enacted. When we look at the Priority 1, Recommendation 9, reemphasize community policing as a department strategy. Priority 1, Recommendation 10, acknowledge and address public perceptions of racism and discriminatory policing by CCPD. Now we go back to the statistics, and certainly I'll tell you this, that if one citizen, not 1%, but if one citizen has the perception that they are being unfairly treated, that's a concern for me. And I know it's a concern for the county, and I know it's a concern for my whole command staff. But we also have to remember that 91.5% of the citizens had a positive feeling about the police department, but the 8.5% that didn't, I want to assure them that we as a police department and me as their chief, we are certainly going to address that. And we've already attempted to develop a more community-oriented policing model, and from this point on, that's what we'll be talking about. First, develop a more specific community-based mission and vision statement, and identifies 6 core values that will be foundational principles of the Cobb County Police Department. When you're trying to explain to someone what you stand for, I'm sure that Sergeant Jones can do that. I'm sure Lieutenant Brown can do that. I'm sure that Deputy Chief Cox can do that. And I'm sure that Officer Smith can do that. But can they do it with a consistent message? As a department and as an organization, just like the county, we have to know what our core principles are. And through a survey and through discussions, we've identified 6 core principles of the Cobb County Police Department. First is integrity. Second is honor, then professionalism, respect, courage, and commitment. And those 6 core principles will guide this department toward the future. And not only that, we have also went back as a department and as a command staff, and we have looked at our mission statement, and we really examined that to determine if it stated what we really wanted it to say. And so we changed that. Our current mission statement reads, the Cobb County Police Department is committed to providing effective and efficient police services to the citizens and businesses of Cobb County with integrity, honor, professionalism, respect, courage, and commitment.
We pledge to enforce all laws and ordinances in a fair, consistent, compassionate, ethical, and impartial manner while recognizing the statutory and judicial limits of our authority and respecting the constitutional and personal rights of all individuals. And so, after we looked at the mission statement, we determined we really didn't have a vision statement. But what's our vision going toward the future? We developed one of those. The Cobb County Police Department is dedicated to continuing to build safer communities and improving quality of life for all citizens by creating and maintaining community and business partnerships based on trust, transparency, and mutual respect, while integrating these partnerships with the skill and knowledge of personnel and their commitment to the department's law enforcement mission. So we certainly sat down as a department, as a command staff, and determined what we stood for and what we wanted to tell our citizens our mission was and our vision was, and I think we've accomplished that. We also developed 4 tenets of conduct that will reinforce the expectations of all employees. They're displayed in every precinct and every unit. If you go anywhere in the Cobb County Police Department organization, any precinct, any unit, you'll be able to look on the wall and you'll be able to see the tenets of conduct, which simply state, there's 4 of them: treat each other in the community with respect, think of a problem as just an opportunity to find a solution, be a positive representative of the department, the community, and the law enforcement profession, both on and off duty, service the community as you would want a family member to be serviced. We also created a precinct discussion group that will have its first meeting in the month of August. That is a committee of community stakeholders for each precinct that will have an opportunity to come in and communicate with the precinct commander, gain clarity of different perspectives, and seek partner solutions to community and law enforcement issues. We're developing a community affairs unit. Now, the community affairs unit is something that we are still developing. As you know, we have a quality of life unit, and that quality of life unit currently is 1 officer short. It is stationed at Precinct 5, and it's made up of a sergeant and an officer. What I intend to do is to create a community affairs unit. We will have the sergeant that's over quality of life lead the community affairs unit, who currently will answer to one of the deputy chiefs. Each precinct major will select an officer to be a community engagement officer and a quality of life officer. That officer will be dual-hatted. That officer will be responsible for engaging the community, homeowner association, neighborhood watch events, other neighborhood events. Also help the precinct commander facilitate his community engagement plan. But more so than that, that same officer will be functioning as a quality of life officer. And what we'll do is we'll determine the young men and women that's going to serve in this capacity over the next 2 or 3 weeks. We will bring them in. We will give them some training in community engagement, and we will also give them the needed training from a code and ordinance standpoint in order to be an effective quality of life officer. That will do a couple of things. It will give us a more effective community engagement protocol and capability, but also it will take 1 person and 1 sergeant who is countywide, or supposed to be countywide, doing quality of life. It will actually give each precinct a quality of life officer. And as we get more staffing, we'll relook that configuration, and we may have a community engagement officer and a quality of life officer in each precinct, because I think they're both important, and I think when we speak to the citizens, they are certainly concerned about what are we going to do and how are we going to grow our quality of life capabilities. And implementation projected, I said by September the 1st, but certainly sometime in September. We are shooting for September the 1st. Partner with community stakeholders to evaluate, seek input, and improve departmental training curriculum. Currently, the state of Georgia, to be a police officer in the state of Georgia, you go through what's called mandate. Currently, the mandate requirements is 408 hours. Our mandate requirements, or our mandate curriculum with the Cobb County Police Department, is 576.
That's where we have taken the basic mandate curriculum and we have said, you know what, there's not enough here. We need more to make a good, effective Cobb County officer. And then we have put additional subjects on that. So where you have various regional academies that have a 10 or 11-week program, we have a 26-week program with 920 hours total. Now, what we've done is we've increased time or added the following: de-escalation training and scenarios, community policing and crime prevention, cultural diversity, guardian philosophy, fairness in policing, implicit bias. And we're also going to introduce crisis intervention training, 24 hours for the recruits. There's none there currently, and 40 hours advanced training so we can start to train the officers that we already have on the street in CIT. Now, how did we go back and examine that curriculum? We didn't do it alone. We actually had segments of the community, citizens, to come in and look at our curriculum and have a frank discussion about the curriculum and give us some insight on what they believe was needed. And as a matter of fact, tomorrow, Tuesday at 1800, there's going to be another meeting out at training with my training unit and various citizens. Develop a more pronounced community-based policing leadership model, which makes community engagement a recognized entity of leadership expectations. This is what I expect from my subordinate commanders. Create a committee to examine our complaint procedures in order to improve the consistency of fielding and tracking complaints, and also developing an early warning system so if we identify an officer that's having some challenges, we can intervene early. If we intervene early, there's a good possibility that we save careers, and we certainly protect that officer and the community. But more so than that, the timeliness of resolution, we're going to shoot for 45 days. That is going to be the rule of thumb, because I think it's unfair for an officer to be accused of wrongdoing, and this drags on for 7 or 8 months. I think it's unfair to the citizen who complained that this drags on for 7 or 8 months and there's no feedback. So we are certainly developing a protocol that will be a more consistent way of fielding complaints, but also we're going to find resolution in a timely manner. We're going to do a better job of giving feedback not only to the citizens but to the officer, because it's unfair to both. And certainly we are going to look at an early warning system so we can identify issues before, small issues before they become big issues. We created a quarterly faith forum to create a more effective partnership with the communities and institutions of faith. Our first one's August 14th. I invite each and every one of you to come. It's at 9:30 at the training center. We've had tremendous response for that. Created a uniform committee to look at possible alternative uniforms. When you talk about a militaristic look, you know, we want our officers to look professional, but we certainly have to understand that the environment they work in, they need a uniform that's functional. So I want it to look professional, but I also want to make sure that the functionality is there also. We have a committee looking at that. Major is heading that committee. Now, when we talk about co-production, and we try to examine what co-production is, you know, it's kind of funny. The same organization that came in and told you about co-production is the same one that can't give us a standard definition of it. So we're going to try to do that for them. Co-production examined. The President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing report addresses co-production policing directly. It states, and this was in the 21st Century Policing report, community policing emphasizes working with neighborhood residents to co-produce public safety. Law enforcement agencies should work with community residents to identify problems and collaborate on implementing solutions that produce meaningful results for the community. And of course, we see another statement from that report that talks about co-production. And when you look at co-production, this is not something that I got from the IACP. This is my command staff and I looking at co-production, seeking definitions from other entities. Co-production is defined, we believe, as a co-created or produced policing model and strategy between law enforcement and the community. The intent is to find solutions, facilitate a continual cycle of engagement, So we can constantly evaluate what's working, what's not, as issues come, we find solutions, share ownership of issues and responses, develop stronger community partnership and trust, and increase transparency, both in the community and within the department. And you'll see the elements that we believe are included in just a co-production model between law enforcement and the community. Certainly there's got to be discussion. There's got to be some type of input either from that discussion or other mechanisms. There's certainly got to be action and engagement, and there's got to be a review process. But I submit to you that co-production is much more than just the community and the police. We've got to take a whole of government and community approach where we still have the discussion, we still have the input, we still have the action engagement, but we also know that we need other things like resources that we may have to come to you good people for, or we may have to seek elsewhere from NGOs or federal grants. It's got to be interagency cooperation. Let's take our midnight basketball. I have to work with Parks and Recs to have a location to do that. So it's not just the police department in the community, but it's other entities also. Legislative action. If I need resources or if I need something that has to come from a legislative body, you have to be involved in this whole of government and community approach. And of course, the review. And that's not only by the department, the county, and citizens, but legal. So it takes all of us. I guess it really does take a village. So when we look at whole of government and community model, this is something that we came up with and gave to the IACP, a collaborative oriented policing environmental response model. We call it Cooper. The Cooper model is collaborative, holistic community and environmental response model that integrates the concepts of community-oriented policing. We know what that is. Community-oriented policing I'll submit to you that every time we make contact with a citizen, that's community-oriented policing. Problem-oriented policing, what are the problems that we're trying to address? It may not be crime, it may be perception from the citizens. Intelligence-led policing, using data to help us focus our precious resources in the most effective location and in the most effective manner. Whole of government and community approach. Integration helps us to analyze the problem, predict what may happen or what will happen, but also it helps us to predict what may or may not happen if we implement this or don't implement this. Certainly it helps with the engagement portion. It helps us find partner solutions, and it creates operational methodologies, processes, protocols. It will also have a positive impact on government efficiency, effectiveness, adaptability, and improves community-government relations, security, stability, and quality of life. Now, if you look at the model itself where you have CCPD, if you are looking below CCPD, that's a subordinate entities within the police department, subordinate units of the agency. We have to organize, we have to have a correct organizational structure. We have to have coordination and synchronization. We have to have resource allocation, meaning priorities plus needs equals distribution, equitable workload sharing, and we also are responsible for the culture that we breed within that organization. But another thing, we have to ask these questions. Do we have understanding of the issue and what we want to achieve? Do we have buy-in from stakeholders, internal, meaning the men and women that work at the Cobb County Police Department, and external, the community, a strategy of development and implementation, a mechanism to measure level of effectiveness? Somehow we need to determine if what we are doing or what we are attempting to do or what we have done, is it effective? The personnel and resources or plan to get them, and knowledge of the second and third order of effects. If we do this, what is that going to create? Is it going to be positive? Is it going to be negative? And then, of course, if you look at the left, we have our peer government entities like the Cobb County Sheriff's Office. We have Marietta PD, Smyrna PD, all the other jurisdictions in Cobb County. And also we have community and business, and the NGOs, the citizens, the institutions of faith. All of these things, all of these entities have to work together in order to truly examine issues and create a whole of government and community approach, or if you want to call it co-production, but it's co-production with everybody taking a part. And above us is the state and federal, where we have organizations and programs that can either give us enforcement, like our multi-jurisdictional task forces, or they can give us some type of government aid, grant, partnership, and community assistance program. And if we want to use an example, if the issue is based on on the IACP report, there's a perception of bias-based policing among segments of the community. What can we do as an agency? Well, you can see here, we'll use data to help examine the issues. We'll evaluate training curriculum of personnel to include recruit and leadership training. Use internal committee to develop training curriculum and needs, develop community engagement initiatives, and better communicate, identify issues, and find partner solutions. Create community engagement unit, and I've explained what that is. But what do we need our other government partners to do? If we go to the left, partner with other agencies and jurisdictions to bring in outside training vendors. That helps us all be better law enforcement agencies. Whether it's Cobb County, Marietta, or Smyrna, if one agency finds itself at risk with the community by proxy, we're all at risk with the community. Partner with other agencies in jurisdiction to develop a leadership academy concept that makes us all better as a law enforcement entity whole within the county. Leverage other agencies to assist in community initiatives. Then we go to the right and you'll see the community, the things that the community can do to help with that problem, with that issue, and also the federal government. So we're not just saying this is what the police and the community can do, but you got to look at it full spectrum and holistically to understand what we all have to do in order to address these issues. That's the intent of the intent of model. The model can address issues and problems that are presumed, validated, and perceptional. And as we go forward with the IACP report response strategy, work with IACP and other stakeholders to create a whole of community model that is adaptive and holistic in nature. The model should address issues and problems that are presumed, validated, or perceptional, using all community and government resources. Work with the IACP and other stakeholders to develop a model implementation strategy. The strategy should ensure continuity and acclimation both internally and externally, because it's not just about the police department, but we've got to educate the police department, but we've also got to educate the community, which when we look at the third, engage IACP to help develop an organizational improvement plan, leveraging available resources to educate, train department and community, improve organizational leadership, improve organizational data collection and evaluation, improve organizational policies, procedures and protocols, and develop a strategy for the future that assists the department in being more effective, efficient, adaptive to crime, terrorism, and community trends and issues. Commissioners, what's your questions?
That was certainly a lot of information shared, and we appreciate the thoroughness of your evaluation of the report and what we can do to put in place recommendations from the report. With that, Commissioners, do you have any questions? I see Commissioner Burrow, his hand up.
Thank you, Chief. My first question is, again, when do you sleep?
Well, I try to keep my two deputy chiefs up too.
Yeah, that's true. You have good help.
I do.
That is a lot to absorb, but I commend you on hitting the ground running as we knew you would, and addressing the issues from the ICAP report and having a plan to move forward and address these issues. And I like that you've put together a faith-based seminar already, and look, I appreciate everything you're doing.
Well, thank you.
Very good.
I think it's a great job. I'm very pleased, and I think that we're moving in the right direction. I appreciate all your hard work, Chief. The new model, or a new coin model or whatever, is that going to fit in with what we were working on with the grant and everything?
I believe so.
Do we have to go a certain way to get that, you think?
I believe it is. I'm talking with Mr. Baker at the IACP. I actually have presented this to him, and of course, it gives the IACP. See, the problem with the co-production is that we've asked them to give us a co-production model. There's no co-production model, and we have built one for them. And certainly, we think that it is holistic and full spectrum in nature. They also believe that. Now, the first thing that we've asked them for is the educational assistance.
Correct.
And I'll know more about that when Director Heaton and I speak with them on the 18th. And as we go further with the IACP and engage with them, we are certainly looking at other resources that they can help us with. Not only educational, but also software. And we intend to leverage their grant capabilities as much as we possibly can.
Great, okay. Thank you, sir. Great job.
Yes, sir.
So a few questions here. I appreciate the level of initiative to provide the IACP a model for something that they suggested to us. I remember when they were here and they were talking about co-production, and perhaps similar to you, I had some question about how you differentiate that from community policing, what makes it unique. And what I walked away with is that co-production is working with the community and more so in the creation of policy beyond community policing, which is, I think, more so for building relationships with the community. And I think the bias-based policing example you provided is a good example of that. It's my understanding that the community was involved with helping to shape what some of that training or could look like, or what some of the vulnerabilities are from a community perspective, which I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
helped prompt that. How I see that more of an example than I see anything else. What are some other examples if you see co-production being useful in our practices?
Well, I think the main thing that has to occur when we say community-oriented policing or co-production, we sometimes believe that that is what the police department is doing, and certainly that's part of it. But there has to be two-way communication, and I think that opening up that two-way communication, for instance, the faith-based forum that we're doing, the precinct discussion groups is another mechanism of communication where we certainly can not only talk with each other, but hopefully listen to each other. Having the community come out to training and give some insight into the training curriculum and get their insight on how the curriculum is taught, I think has been very valuable. And certainly there are other mechanisms that we can explore as we go forward in the future, leveraging more and more community input.
You appreciate that. Did I see a hand go up? No? Okay. Very good. Okay, does anybody else have any other questions? Well, thank you so much for the amount of time that you've put into not only preparing this report, but again, taking the recommendations from the IACP and integrating them with your practices. And thank you for all you've done to engage us with allowing us to even be involved with suggesting members of the community for the advisory groups for the precincts. We look forward to seeing what comes out of these efforts.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you, and thank each of you for all your support. And I would like to say in ending that I want to tell you that I really appreciate the men and women who work for the Cobb County Police Department. They're phenomenal individuals in my command staff. What was created and what's being created is not me, it's us, and I appreciate their efforts too. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes today's work session. You're welcome.
Who needs a chair?